Hello, welcome to another edition of What's He Gonna Mess Up Today? Well, we're gonna start out by joining the edges of the board so we get it nice and square on the edge, and planing down the wide edge, cutting it down to reasonably square blanks. This is hard maple, by the way. Joint down the edges where my table saw left it a little bit rough. We'll talk about that later. Okay, cut them down to blanks that are going to be the length of the width of the cutting board that I want. Okay, bring in some Purple Heart because we don't want to make this a completely boring board. And because Purple Heart's really expensive, we're going to cut it in little tiny pieces. Okay, got those cut down. Just flatten them out, take off the bandsaw cuts. Trim down ever so slightly. Once we got those, we're going to cut them down to length by just cutting them in half. Now let's lay everything out, see how it's looking. Purple, white, purple, white, purple, white. Looking good. All right, let's clean these up. If you don't know, Purple Heart has a lot of oils in it, so it's good to clean it with acetone before gluing it up. Actually improves your chances of having good adhesion with the Titebond Type 3. So that's what I'm doing here, is cleaning it up with some acetone. All right, let's get some glue on these things. Loving that squeeze out, getting some really good squeeze out, putting it on really thick. It was about this time when one of my sons saw the video, he thought, wow, looks like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I may have to do something about that. We may not be able to stop with it just looking like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Peanut butter and jelly. So this was my first time using these K-style clamps from anywhere, but these ones from Tay Tools. Let's pause for a moment of reflection while this glue is drying and just look at my initial thoughts on them. First off, fantastic. I love the amount of pressure I can put on this. I'm probably in that you shouldn't be putting that much pressure on the clamp mode, but compared to where I am with my trigger pull clamps, I'm loving it. One thing that I would say out there, if you haven't used these before and you're going to shoot a video using them, I would recommend practicing it before you do it, because I should have realized this, because every other clamp in the world I've ever used has always been like this. But as you take this clamp, I wanted to operate down here from the, ooh, this part moves so I can tighten it up end. So in case you missed it, I'll play for play it. I glued it up over here. All the glue started dripping here. I realized that that's not going to come to me. I got to go to it. So then it was that awkward moment of I've got to move that down, and then I've got to slide this to it through all of the glue that's now dripped on the rail. So from now on, I don't have to go watch somebody else's video, because I've seen people do it before and it never looked quite that awkward, or as awkward as it felt when I did it. But you got to glue it up, and maybe they always do it sideways. So you glue it up stacking to that end, and then you can slide this up to it and lock it in place. But I did not know that. Lesson learned. Probably wish I wouldn't have done it while I was recording. Oh, but hey, if we didn't learn, we wouldn't be woodworking anymore. So, lesson learned. Hopefully I can save somebody else, some future YouTuber, current YouTuber out there, a little bit of silliness while recording. So, loving the clamps. I really think thinking I'm going to like the effect I'm going to get from these. I'm going to give it an hour, then I'm going to come back and scrape off the semi-dry glue, and then I'm going to let it sit overnight and come back and rework it. So we'll see you in an hour.
1 hour later.
So the reason I do this is because at this point the glue is still nice and soft. It's set up enough that the boards aren't going to come apart, but I can easily scrape off that semi-wet, semi-dry glue. Makes cleanup so much easier in the long run. Should have put tape on the clamps.
So I forgot to hit record, but I just ran it through the drum sander, got both sides nice and smooth. Oh, it's looking pretty. I think this is going to turn out pretty sweet.
Squaring up the edges.
All right, minor change in plans. I am going to use this extra purple heart that I got. I like those single stripe, but I'm actually going to make it a little bit more complex. I kind of wanted to do this from the beginning, but I wasn't sure how I'd do it, and I think I've got the vision now. So let's get to it.
Oh, here I'm just cutting the stock down to size.
The problem I'm running into, this is power tip time. I'll steal that from you, Matt. This throat plate, or this insert, is old and beat up. The previous owner of this saw just used it for sheet goods, and so it didn't matter. But when I come in with a piece of flat good, when the pressure puts here, I no longer have a flat table. So this is actually indented. So when I start getting on these smaller pieces, now I've got wobble points. So in essence, it comes in and then it tilts down into it, and then it gets pushed up and goes flat for a second.
As I'm milling this down and getting this prepped for the board, I've got a quick question for you. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see how to make a zero clearance insert for a table saw. So comment below if you'd like to see that, because I really need to make one. So please encourage me to make one. Okay, still just cutting them down to size, getting everything laid out, making sure everything's looking good. This point, I'm trying out my new Harbor Freight clamps, and I'm going one step further. I'm going to actually make some calls for these so I can make sure they don't spring up. So again, checking everything, making sure it's good. Lots and lots of glue. I did acetone these, I just didn't show it. And then acetoned it again when after I ran it through the sander and got it ready to cut up again. We cut this up into chunks, and super top secret behind the pile. Now I'm actually clamping that one down so I can secure it, so I can cut it with the lead. Cut these down, get everything nice. Make sure everything lines up well, looks good. Actually putting tape on the bars this time. Always do that with these. Put some paste wax on there too, it helps. Get the glue all over everything. Clamp it all down, make sure your lines are lined up. Throw some cauls on it, get everything nice and flat, and put way too much pressure on it. And if you're bored, scrape some glue off. Hit it with a hammer, make sure it's really flat, and run it through a drum sander. Man, that's looking good. No more peanut butter and jelly here. Should probably sand that a little bit. Oh wait, let's put a chamfer on the edge. Don't want to use the round over, so I'm getting out the 90-degree V-bit from my CNC machine, putting it in that archaic fixed router. Now this is a bench dog table, just recently got it. I love it. Don't tell my CNC that I'm using its bits and cheating on it with a fixed router. Get all my safeties in place. What I'm doing here is testing, making sure I like the chamfer. Okay, it looks good. Actually, it looks better there. Let's do that one. Get a nice chamfer on all the sides. And once we get that chamfer in, then all we've got left to do is a little bit of sanding. And I love sanding. Actually learned how amazing sanding was from some of my fellow YouTubers out there. Watch Bourbon Moth, and he inspires me to sand every time I watch his show. Use pencil marks to make sure I'm sanding evenly. Just a piece of advice, do not pour rubbing alcohol directly on an end grain cutting board to raise the grain. It poured straight through. But I did get it cleaned up, and look how gorgeous that looks with a little bit of mineral oil on there. And look how that mineral oil just soaks right into that board. Is that not gorgeous? I'm going to flip this over and get the other side, but you can see where the mineral oil is actually starting to come through the board, through the Purple Heart. It drained right through that.